Okay, this is Doug Hall at GFS 1230 on October 31st. And this model is the columns at Formosa, our project. And this is a little explainer video about how to build a elevated concrete deck on concrete columns. So I'd like to say that the assets that are created in this are completely mine, and they're all made by hand. I made them off of a PDF set of plans that was provided by Yates Construction. Any identifying information is underneath of this placard, and so there's assets in here that belong to anybody but. So that being said, there's our columns. This is the way the columns would look if they were all finished, which they're not. Based on the video from yesterday, you can kind of ascertain why that is. But this is to explain quickly as I can how we got our build process and why it is the way it is. So generally, you would install a set of columns to work off of, and that would be these. For instance, it would be these. And so they all have these braces on them when we go to pour them, and they don't come down till the forms come down. And then we would put in the main shoring like this, so you could see why they got to come down. They just interfere with the shoring towers. And these support the concrete beams that tie the columns together. And there's some intermediates, which are here. So this is actually what it looks like before we ever start setting any forms. So you see how the braces got to go, all the forms got to go. You can't just drag everything up and over all this stuff without risking knocking all this over. So that being said, let's assume that we're at that point. And then the next part would be we would form up all of the beams that go in between and tie all the columns together. And these are the grid lines. I just popped them in here so locations would be readily identifiable. So this column over here on C3 and C4 are poured and have been for probably 3 weeks now. These two over here, the connecting ones, are not poured. They're 50% poured today, which is the 31st of October. And this one is half formed, and this one is just rebar sticking in the air. So this thing is 40 feet tall. So these columns are 5'3" by 5'3", and the beams are 5'3" deep. And so it's awfully heavy structure. So all of the formwork for these needs to go in, and then it is connected with plywood across here in the joist system in order to be able to pour the deck. And the progression of a job like this always goes in one direction, because once you lay this out and you start building this way, there's no way to shrink or do, you can't just arbitrarily build pieces of it and expect it to go. And it would go from here in this direction, and we would just build up everything as we go, all the way to we'd be finished. And then we put this form on in between all of that plywood, and then they would pour this deck with the beams all in one piece. So that's the way it needs to go. The problem is that we're having, take the decks off, is I've got 3 columns here. Move that out of the way real quick. I've got A1, A2, and B3, and then these two way over here, and I got nothing connecting in the middle. This one is not. This one's half formed. This one right here is, get into there. Okay, so that one right there is rebar sticking in the air. This one is rebar sticking in the air. And then there are these two right here. There is no rebar on either one of those. It's just dowel sticking out of the slab. So there's no way to progress with this project from one end to the other. And technically, we could go in a different direction, say this direction. If, say, all of A line was poured, or say these two sections were poured, we could start here, but we would still have to move in one direction this way. So and we can't. So so that's our problem. But once all of this is up, it's got to get poured, and we get underneath here and strip. And all of these, rid of that. So then you got all this shoring to strip out and all these forms up underneath. And if that wasn't hard enough, then Yates has introduced this set of foundations right here. So do a couple things here. Get rid of all of this. Okay, so you can see how the foundations, if you go right down here, are going to interfere with the shoring. And the blue, make that, say, a gray color. Okay, so now you can see a little bit better. And so these are concrete foundations, and you can see how they interfere with the shoring. You can't just not have these cross ties or the whole thing will fall apart. So that's got to get re-engineered for that particular reason. We're working on it right now. We should have it resolved relatively quickly, if not already. But the problem is we still don't have enough columns to tie all these beams together. And you can't just stick these beams out in the air and wait for that column to get poured. It's all got to be connected so it doesn't fall down. And we can't do that. So that's elevated deck 101, I guess you could call it. And that's where we're at. So those are the struggles we're having. We've been on this project. I've personally been there since August 1st. And at this point, I would be already have the deck poured and waiting to strip out all of this. But because there's no connecting columns, I can't connect any beams, so I can't progress with any of the project. This has just been a fiasco. Anyway, so there you go. That's the short and ugly of it. If you have any questions, give us a call and we'd be happy to work them out.